hate to do that. I'm calling the Rules and City Government Committee meeting to order. Please note for the record, Alderman Arnett is present and Alderman Schandelmeyer is not going to be with us today. We do have a quorum. It only takes two, so we're good and can conduct business. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Madam Chair, I move that we amend the agenda to add hearing of the rules being promulgated on parklets.
So your
Pursuant
motion
to ordinance 1322.
So to amend the agenda?
To add.
And I'll second that.
Thank you.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Takia, did I make that clear enough?
What was the last part in accordance to?
As pursuant to ordinance 13-22.
0621.
I mean, what?
0621.
No, ordinance 01322, which is the ordinance for sidewalk cafes that adds a new definition for parkettes, and this is promulgation of the rules to.
I think we're talking two different things, though. You're talking about the specific ordinance that creates the requirement to come before us to
That is
get
correct.
the change, and you're talking about the ordinance that specifically reflects the action of the change.
You're right.
So,
Those are two different things.
Right. So the motion was to pursuant to 1322.
Okay.
So we're good. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the April 1st meeting.
So move.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Please say aye. Aye. Okay, so we're going to take up for our first item the parklets. Mr. Rice, our Director of
Economic
Development, welcome.
Thank you.
And you look like I look when I fly. Actually, I've stopped wearing the shield, but I still do the mask, so, but I understand you have small children and you can't be too cautious. So thank you for being with us this afternoon. So tell us about this new application process, and tell us about the process and then what things have changed that facilitates you needing to be here today.
Sure. I'll start with, and can you hear me well?
You can get a little bit closer with your mic.
How's that?
Better?
Okay. I'll start just giving a little bit of background to, what...
Mr. Rice, is your mic on?
Can you hear me now?
Oh,
Yes.
much better.
Sure thing. So the city manager formed the outside dining working group on December 7, 2021. This group was tasked with coming up with recommendations for a seasonal parklet outside dining program for the warm months of 2022. The group was also asked to investigate the possibility of instituting a dynamic pricing model for the parklet leases. The working group held 5 full group meetings during the months of December, January, and February to come up with a set of recommendations for the city manager. Several smaller meetings also took place during this timetable. On February 26th, the outside dining working group submitted its recommendations to the city manager for review. On March 7, the city manager was briefed on the recommendations by the working group. The program framework and the website launch were approved by the city manager on March 17. After some web development, the seasonal parklet program website was actually launched on March 18 by the Office of Economic Development. 3 applications had been received and were under various stages of review by city staff when Economic Development essentially learned that the program regulations needed to officially go before this body, Rules and City Government, for review. So on April 6th, the seasonal parklet program website was updated to enable the public to comment on the program regulations. On April 12th, a public notice was placed in the Capitol Gazette advertising the program regulations and the opportunity for public input at this meeting today. The public notice essentially will cost the Office of Economic Development $5,356.20, and it's scheduled to run for 30 days. The last date is May 11. To this date, however, we have not received any public comments on the program through the website. In recent weeks, 4 more applications for seasonal parklets have been received by the Office of Economic Development, bringing the total to 7 requested parklets. So that's just a little bit of background, with respect to how we got here. At the time of the creation of the working group, the recovery zones had been not in existence for about 5 weeks. The recovery zones had sunsetted on November 1st. And so the, thinking was, without a state of emergency, without the recovery zones, how could the city roll out a parklet program and, facilitate outside dining this calendar year? So that's what got the gears in motion. Under the recovery zone framework with the state of emergency, we had, parklets and we had a permitting process. But because it was a state of emergency, the outside dining that the restaurants, and some retailers had, or, the outside experience, there was no cost to the restaurants primarily for this activity. And, without a state of emergency and, the executive order that goes with it, rolling out a new program would require, per code, there to be a lease of city property, because with the parklet program specifically, most of the parklets actually are located on city-owned parking spaces. Some are metered, some are not, but they're public spaces. So a lease would be required, approved by the council for a seasonal parklet program to continue. So we were coming up with a framework for essentially a new program that would replicate the spirit of the recovery zones.
So this application that I'm looking at is the new application for the lease of city spaces
Yes.
to be used as what we're calling parklets for restaurants.
Yes.
Only restaurants?
It doesn't have, it's not exclusive to restaurants. I mean, retail establishments can apply as well.
And only in certain wards?
Well,
Or should I ask the question in a different way?
no, that's a fair question. We can only, there are only certain available spaces that the city owns that are publicly owned spaces, around the city. So the program would have to be calibrated to where the city actually owns public spaces and where there's availability for a parklet to be erected.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I'm out of order because I should have allowed the alderman to ask questions first. I'm looking at a chart with your proposed rates
Yes.
for the parklets,
Appendix B.
and I only see 7 areas.
Yeah, that's correct.
So does that mean these are the only areas eligible?
Those are the only areas where we could identify publicly owned parking spaces that could be converted into parklets, theoretically. Correct.
Okay. Alderman Arnett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to start by, first of all, thanking Mr. Rice and Hope and others on the planning staff for their work on this. I also want to give them due credit because I think they're the first organization in the city that has actually followed the processes outlined in ordinance 0621. So thank you for that, but no good deed goes unpunished. So I guess my overarching question, and this is really, and Stephen, when you and Hope and I were talking, you said that's for a higher level. I don't know that the city has ever officially come up with a policy saying we're endorsing outdoor dining. So here we're busy doing all of these rules, but we haven't done rules on outdoor dining. And it's one of my issues with both 0922. Issues with 0922, 1122, and 01322. So in many respects, I think we've gotten the horse before the cart. But when I was talking with the public, we can all do that.
Yours will be next.
Hope not.
Are you doing that? Are you calling us?
Yeah. I started raising these overarching questions, and they correctly pointed out to me this needs to be taken to a higher level. We had a very abbreviated meeting called by Eric Lashinsky. When was that? Was that yesterday? Or the
I believe it was maybe
Wednesday.
2 days ago.
Yeah, where I'd wanted to get into these more overarching issues, but I really think they're issues that need to start with the council and with the committee. I'm not saying I'm opposed to outdoor dining. In fact, I enjoy it. But I do think that we need to have a policy statement saying the city is endorsing outdoor dining and is endorsing it in the following format. And I think Mr. Rice is correct. It really is carrying on in the spirit of the recovery zones. So we've had this rulemaking, which is generated out of 01322, and it is 01322, which was for sidewalk cafes, added parklets, which are on-street parking spaces that businesses can rent, and they can rent for a price that is suggested in the Appendix B that are in 7 areas of the city. So while this is legislation that is citywide, it isn't necessarily really that case. It is one of the things that I would like to discuss with the staff. The reason I became alerted to this, by the way, was when Hope Stewart was giving an update on the business update for the Maritime Advisory Board, and she said 013 is something to the effect of 013 is taking care of outdoor dining. And I thought, what? Wait a minute. And that's when I went and I found on the city's website, under the business title, all of this information that Stephen and the working group put together. And it was eye-opening, and it did raise questions, and I wrote up my notes from that meeting with Stephen and Hope, and I passed it on to you. I also passed it on up to the chain of command in planning and zoning. And those are some questions that I want to raise. But I think that for the council, not for Stephen, the issue is, have we a policy? We are the 9 policymakers that is endorsing outdoor dining. And I don't think we do.
Well, I agree. I don't think we do, but I don't think that's our responsibility
Yes, it is.
as the policymakers. Staff,
It falls onto the staff because, as Stephen said, the work group was formed at the request of the Director of Planning and Zoning. Who all was in
the
that?
city manager, I thought.
Oh, the city manager.
Yes, it was the city manager.
So
Yeah.
who all was in that work group? Can you tell? Is that in the back? Can we get a copy of your background statement that you made, by the way?
Sure.
Yeah.
I emailed it, and so.
Okay.
Was that in the email you
Yes.
sent on Wednesday or Tuesday?
Yes.
That's what I just sent to you, Alderman.
Well, but I don't see, I tried to click on background. I don't see it as an attachment. All
No,
it says is
scroll
number-
down. Well, there's Appendix A that is attached. If you scroll,
Five or
keep
six
scrolling.
attachments. Let's see,
Sorry, I
1, 2,
didn't- I
3,
didn't
4,
look at
5
it.
I
attachments.
didn't either,
Okay,
so.
okay.
I can, I'll have to go back and look through the meeting information, and I can get you the list of attendees for the working group. I just don't, I could try it off the top of my head, but I'll probably forget someone.
Actually, Madam Chair, what I think you've given us is probably more than sufficient. I don't know that we need, I mean,
I
I'd
don't
be
need
interested
to
and I'll
know.
read it, but I'm not
Yeah.
sure that that's relevant to what we're doing right now.
Yeah, they made the recommendations to the city manager.
Yep.
City manager, I assume, directed Mr. Rice to come up with the procedures. So that's where we are. So
Right.
policy, that's our responsibility. But for the purpose of the process change that we're here for today, Mr. Rice can answer our
Right.
questions.
So the questions, I can't believe I don't have my,
But everything that's in this packet is in
Yeah,
what he has
so-
provided us.
so my questions stem from the meeting of April 21st. And they are generic in nature. Mr. Rice has explained to us what they did, which was to put a notice on the city's website and to publish it in the newspaper. So as far as that goes for this rulemaking process, that was what was done. My concern is, I think, back on us, I don't think that's sufficient because I don't think anybody has any clue that rulemaking is going on. And so I think there has to be a better way to broadcast that information because as we have on the city's website, if people want to give input, they can give input to it. But how many people from the public have given input on this?
We haven't received any input
Yeah.
from the public.
And
How was it advertised, other than a blurb in the paper?
That was the primary
But it was also
advertising.
on the city's website under
Tool.
the business tab, pull-down
Okay.
tab. So all of the rules were followed appropriately. And again, this isn't on what staff did. This is a lesson for us. This is really the first, and I'm sorry you're the first out of the box, Stephen, but this is a lesson for us about when we promulgate legislation, we need to know what it actually is doing. And I don't think I was the sponsor of that legislation, thought it through sufficiently. So I don't think there's good enough public notice, but also I don't think there was good enough notice to us, the city council. I would suggest that when rules making is beginning, it would not be hard to send the city council an email saying, we're getting ready to promulgate rules on such and such.
Well, I'm cautious about micromanaging staff, and there's a thin line here between letting us know about what is happening and us having, and we don't have a input to what they do. They get their policies from us, but we have to give staff the autonomy to do what we've asked them to do. Now, if we don't give them enough guidance,
Right.
again, that falls on us.
But therein
So-
is the rub, because we are the 9 people that get it in the neck when people don't like rulemaking.
Well, we're going to get it in the neck no matter what,
Well,
by
I
somebody
understand
for
that,
something.
but I think
you
we
know.
could do some things to try to mitigate that. So it does seem to me, and this is to go back into ordinance, not what the group did, that when rulemaking is commencing, that there be just a notice to the city council that we're getting ready to promulgate rules. Now, the city is rife with rules that have been promulgated, many of which are not even published, and that we don't even know about. And so I think that this is a lesson for the ordinance not for this rulemaking. But I do think that there are some things that are particular to the rulemaking, and if you would allow me, Madam Chair, this is why Mr. Rice is here, and I'm going to the outline of the meeting that I kindly was given with Mr. Rice and Ms. Stewart. And so it really gets down to the bottom of the first page, and this is where the rubber meets the road. And you mentioned it earlier, Stephen, this dynamic pricing. And I guess I have some questions about, it's dynamic in that every quarter Hope does a survey of the commercial rental space in various locations of the city. And to the extent that that commercial rental value changes, the pricing will change also. And that presents a couple of problems. One is I consider the commercial rental space to be a proxy for the value of parking in the different areas. But also, these parklets are leased for 3 or 6 months. So one would presume once they've got a rental rate that is issued and locked in, even if commercial space, say they lock in for 6 months, even if commercial space changes, we're not coming back and changing their lease, are we?
Yeah, just a few minor corrections. Hope actually runs a commercial price per square foot for each, I'll say, community in the city. She does that on a monthly basis, so we know, what the commercial rates are. What we would be doing essentially is, or what we have done is, in December of 2021, we pegged the pricing differential of December 2021 between the, I'll say the top rate, the market rate for downtown and the other areas of the city. We use that as the foundation for the percentage pricing differential for the program. So we would essentially be using the December of the prior year as the baseline for coming up with the lease rates and rolling the program out, I presumably in February or March.
So my comments as a fellow economist and understanding the rules of supply and demand, I'm not sure that's the best proxy, because it also happens that downtown, where the highest commercial rent is also rich in parking resources, structuring resources, surface area resources, and so on, whereas other areas, and I will speak parochially about Eastport, is not rich in parking resources. So if scarcity is a driver of the price of demand, you would think that you would look at the scarcity of parking, or the parking per some measure, per capita parking available per commercial establishment, and that would be another way of coming up with a proxy for pricing. And I would suggest, having just noodled it a little bit, pricing in Eastport would be a lot higher if you're doing it per capita per commercial business and space available, that it would be more expensive to use these spaces in Eastport on the street than it would be downtown. So it's almost like I would see, if you did it on the scarcity of parking, this price pyramid would be reversed. And it's where the parking is the rarest that it should be the most expensive. Because if we're doing this pricing to pay for the establishments using a public resource, and therefore using it up and taking it away from other uses, it would seem to me that that has a higher value, and therefore it should be more costly.
Well, Alderman, maybe you can ask Ms. Stewart to reevaluate how she came to these numbers. But I'm sure she's used whatever.
Well, it's pretty clear what was used, and I think it's a good thing. It's a survey it's a monthly survey. I actually wrote that down in my notes from our meeting. It's a monthly survey of the cost per foot for commercial space in various parts of the city. And I get that that's what this is, but I have some concerns about whether this is really the right proxy for the price of parking.
Well, and that's why I'm suggesting that maybe you can have a discussion with Ms. Stewart about it so you can share your perspective. But this is what it is at the moment. I don't really understand what it is, to be honest with you. So what does the percentage mean in this chart?
So I'm going to read just a little bit from the operational framework, and hopefully that will help help to
You have
explain
that.
things.
I gave you a copy of the operational framework. It's 3 pages. And is this the seasonal park program?
Seasonal
framework?
Parklet program operational framework.
Right, so that's about 3 pages in on the packet that I gave you.
Is this on the Parklet application?
No, it looks like this.
I see all my pages
go.
are
You got it
separate.
right there.
Okay.
So number 3, it says utilize the dynamic pricing model for the daily lease rate. The seasonal parklet lease rate will be determined in part by the area of the city in which the parklet is located. Prices will be adjusted annually based upon the percentage differential between the December combined average commercial price per square foot in downtown versus other parts of the city. For example, let's say the average commercial price per square foot is $25 in downtown and $20 in Eastport at the end of December. Therefore, there is a 20% difference in price between the two neighborhoods. Let's also assume that it has been determined by the city that the downtown seasonal parklet lease rate will be $50 per day the following spring. If a parklet will be constructed in Eastport on April 15 for 6 months, the lease rate of that space would be $40 per day, and that's a 20% discount based upon the market rate price per square foot.
That, however, is not what the table shows. The table shows a discount rate for Eastport of 38%.
Correct.
So
the table is the actual, but what I was describing was theoretically how we derive the pricing schedule.
So let me ask, I still don't understand the percentage. The Main Street program is 100% of what?
it's the highest price.
Right. It's
So-
if we look at the December downtown commercial price per square foot, the average, and we use that as the top line, and we look at we use that in comparison to the other places around the city, we understand the difference between that downtown market rate and the other areas of the city. And that percentage difference is what we use to come up with the percentage difference for the lease rate for the seasonal parklet program.
Okay, so just indulge me for a moment. So Main Street, that's the optimum. So the square footage in the fourth quarter is $48.76. So the parklet rate is going to be $50.
Well, we're picking a parklet. The outside dining working group picked these rates, so we had to pick a parklet rate, and then everything else, flows from there. A downtown rate, and then everything else would flow from there.
But everything else is compared to downtown.
Correct.
So going down to Forest Drive,
Yeah.
that has it's not the lowest,
It's 41%.
It's
of
41% of the downtown cost.
downtown. Right.
So, okay, so we just kind of rounded those numbers up. So the 1993, and we would be charging 2044.
We did round the numbers, correct?
Yeah.
For
Oh.
ease.
I don't know how you round up and get odd numbers. I mean, odd amounts.
I'm sorry.
From 1993 to $20.44.
No, I'm sorry. So the blue column is the December average square foot rate, commercial square foot rate across the
For
city.
the fourth quarter.
Right.
Okay.
And so the Main Street Parklet rate was set at $50. And then the difference between that $50 and the 41%, I guess the actual difference is it's on
That number doesn't make sense to
59.
me. 41% of
Of that 50 is
100%.
$20.44.
So 41% of $50 is $20.44?
Correct.
Okay.
So, but,
Okay, I guess that does make sense.
but this is where it really gets down to a dialogue amongst council members. To be direct, I don't agree with the proxy that's used here. And had I had an opportunity to be involved earlier in the process when this promulgation was being done, I would have liked to have been able to make the argument, I think pricing in Eastport should be more expensive than downtown, not less expensive, because Eastport doesn't have the parking resources that downtown has. And so the question, and again, it's not for Stephen, and I'm sorry, really, Stephen, we're dragging you into the middle
Well, the
of
city
this.
manager should be the one that we're having this
Right.
discussion with.
Yes, exactly.
Because he's the one that created the committee and allowed their recommendations to go through
Right.
to the form of the process. So, but this is the process.
Correct.
And these are the calculations that are being used based upon what the committee decided.
Correct.
So it's before us because we have to hear all changes. We don't evaluate them.
Well, we do.
I mean, we can
review
evaluate,
it.
but we can't.
We can't change it.
We can't change it.
We can only change it by
we can-
changing legislation.
Exactly. That's, our role is simply, your role to us is simply for information. And so, do we have any other questions about the actual process?
Yes.
Because that's what
Right.
we need clarity on, if we don't have it already.
I have one other big question, and that is, there is more in this write-up about this also makes parking even more scarce in Eastport because we're taking street parking away by renting them to these businesses. But the real question, and it came up again last night at the Planning Commission, and it's something that Eric Lashinsky wrote up in his staff report on 0922, which is, should these changes in rules not be part of the restaurant special exception process? And the reason that I'm bringing that up is we are de facto giving restaurants more restaurant space, and they're taking away parking, and that should be an amendment to their special exception permit. And the nice thing about doing it through a special exception process is the special exception process calls for a public hearing before the Board of Appeals and under the rules in Title 21. So I think this whole thing about how are we handling all of these different changes, the same thing with the liquor board. All of these restaurants have to go before the liquor board because they're increasing the number of patrons and they need to renew their liquor license to get approval for serving liquor outdoor into a larger number of people. And again, the liquor board held their hearing earlier this week with no public notice. There was nothing posted at the places that were being heard. There was nothing promulgated in the Capitol that these licenses were being heard, and yet the license was being approved. And one of the licenses was Forward Brewing, which has a whole bunch of other kinds of aspects surrounding it, and it really would have been beneficial to have had a public hearing and allowed the neighbors to weigh in. And maybe the liquor board would have or would not have changed their liquor license. But again, my overarching thing on these rulemaking things in this process is when you look at who is consulted, and I have that on the front page here, the application process goes to Annapolis Parking, Department of Public Works, Office of the Fire Marshal, Office of Law, other departments, and the Alcoholic Control Beverage Board. It does not come to the public. It does not come to the council even. And,
Actually, Alderman, if I may.
yes, please.
The, under Appendix A, steps to follow to request seasonal parklets and to rent public city property. Under the current iteration of our program, number 4, states that the city council would have final approval of the lease. So the lease is for the parklets under the current guidelines for the program, unless the council decides to, make a change, would actually come before the council for final approval.
So thank you very much for bringing that up, because when the lease comes to the city council, can we deny it? Can we change the lease amount?
It says it comes for final approval, so.
I know, but I want to know, so do the union contracts come to us for final approval?
And we can not approve them. We have
can,
that option.
But that's what I want to know, is the thinking of the administration as represented by you, Stephen. And again, I think you're right, the city manager should be here, or at least the director of planning and zoning. But really, what is the expectation when it comes to the council as a lease? Do we have then, you think, the prerogative to say, we think that lease is too low, we think that lease is too high, we don't think that lease should be granted?
Alderman, I don't think that's a fair question for staff.
Well, it's
a question for us.
process. Well, I know.
I mean, I think we should be thinking about legislation that will correct the wrongs that you've been citing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. Staff can't make these changes. That's our responsibility.
Right.
They can tell us, maybe somewhere in the process, at the beginning of any change, we get notification. Just like with planning and zoning, whenever there's and we made this change, we get these notices of any action taken by the planning department. We changed code to make sure they made us aware. And we could do the same thing with these applications.
So is it your sense that we get the planning director gives that spreadsheet where we have things that are in process for approving permits for various projects around the city? Is this kind of approval of leases something that can go into that matrix as an update?
I'm honestly not. I'm just not familiar with that.
This is so unfair to you.
That matrix.
Yeah, I don't understand your question.
Well, the
the
Environmental Matters Committee gets a report from the Director of Planning and Zoning every month where the director provides us a multi-page, very detailed matrix for every major project in the city. Crystal Spring, whatever it's called now, is in there. Parkside Preserve was in there. And it traces it through all of the process in terms of getting their Forest Conservation Act approved and all of those things. And what I'm saying is, would this be something that could be an update there? And again, you're right, that's a question for us. But I want to go back to this approve the lease. Do you think that when we get the lease approval or the
negotiated agreements,
the surplusing approval for Hillman Garage, which it's ironic it's coming down, but we haven't approved that yet, that we're going to deny it? I mean,
Right.
these things come as fait accompli. And really, I would, if I were one of the restaurants and I went through all of the process, I dotted all the i's and crossed the t's that Stephen and the staff have laid out, and it gets to the council and some alderman gets up, could be Alderman Gay, saying, I don't think that place in Ward 8 should get a lease to do that. I was turned down for service there, and the council turns down the lease. I don't think that's a really realistic step. And we could do it.
Well, maybe that would, with the ability to do that, which we already have, would encourage staff to keep us informed. I mean, that's the only,
Well, I think
That's
it
the best way.
would. So the ones that are, you said there's 7 applications now for parklets?
Correct.
And is there only one in Ward 8? Davis's Pub?
Correct.
Right. But just as an aside, Forward Brewing could come in and ask to lease 2 spaces in front of it. Boatyard could come in. Ruth Chris could come in. Luna's could come in. We could have a lot of on-street parking leased to restaurants. And by the way, Joe Rubino has asked, and Rock Taves has asked, can they lease 2 spaces in front of their businesses downtown? They're not restaurants, but why is it only restaurants get this leasing ability?
well, that was one of my questions early on for Mr. Rice, if it's applicable to other businesses.
Right.
And again, that's a decision either we are to make or the city manager.
If we establish a policy for outdoor dining.
Well, that's a whole nother, that should be the first step.
I agree, it should be.
You know, but again, that's something, that's our, I don't want to say dereliction, but it's our responsibility.
I think we've
So,
abused Mr.
I
Rice's
agree.
time enough, but I do want to ask one question. If I were to come to you with an alternate dynamic pricing scheme, is it too late to consider that? I mean, I really do like this notion of looking at the amount of public parking spaces available. You're using Eastport, I'm not sure how that's defined, versus the amount of demand on parking as a better way to price. The dynamics, I don't know how you make that dynamic, because that's probably a one-time only or every 5-year kind of study. But I do think it's fair. Now, I know Davis's would hate me making this argument, because Kevin Colbeck is already complaining about the price in here and saying that, because this is a price per space per month, right? So it's not cheap.
This would be a daily
Yeah, right.
rate.
So over a month, even at $17 or $18, that's $3,000 that he has to make up in additional sales from the spaces. And I did include, and Stephen, you don't know this, but I included the thing you sent us about Davis's application that shows, where did that go?
Well, while you're looking, the Parklet rate is for one space or for all of
One
the
space per
spaces
day.
within that Parklet? Because I assume the Parklet is all the spaces.
Yeah, so it would be 1 space per day.
So if the Parklet takes up 4 spaces,
You can't, right? It's limited to just 2.
Yeah, so
okay, so it's no more than $100 a day. Is that correct?
that would be the max on public streets.
Right, for downtown.
For downtown,
Yes.
the main street.
But you remember
Area.
this is the diagram for Davis's Pub.
Yes.
So it's showing the 2 spaces, the number of tables that they're gonna put in those 2 spaces.
So
which
where are the 2 spaces?
They're, just divide this rectangle. He's showing that these are 2 parking spaces right next to Davis's.
No,
Okay, wait, this is 4th,
Yeah, 4th Street.
this is Chester, and this
Yeah.
is 4th Street,
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
So the 2 spaces are where?
Right beside Davis's, right where the sidewalk picnic tables are now,
So from here to here
is 2 spaces.
are 2 spaces.
Right.
These are the picnic tables.
Those are new tables. I can see the number of tables Kevin's getting in, but I don't know where people sit because they're awfully close together. It's probably not to scale.
What does that say?
I don't
Back
know.
something?
Oh, that's the barricades around.
Oh, barricades,
Yeah, to
okay.
protect. So here's 4th Street, and these are barricades, just like Harvey's barricades downtown.
Okay.
On Buddy's Crabs and Rib.
So they would need 2 spaces, and at this rate,
Per day.
per day, it would be $38.20 a day. Am I
Yes,
reading this correct?
You are reading it exactly.
Isn't that good
correct.
for an English teacher? I did that in my head and
That was
everything.
great.
Cents. And then you multiply
I can
that,
add and multiply.
you multiply that by 30
By
to come up
30.
with a month. And then, as Kevin is pointing out to me, that's rain or shine. When
Right,
it's raining, it's not likely he's going to be able to use those spaces. So his argument is, even at this low rate relative to downtown, he's going to have to sell a lot of food and alcohol in order to make it worth his while. So at this rate, he's still complaining. And if I said I think that rate should be $50 a day and downtown should be $19 a day because of the scarcity argument, it may make it infeasible for people to do these parklets.
well, going back to your first question, your last question, I think that has to go back to the city manager.
Yeah.
If you want to reevaluate the pricing, he's the one who, commissioned the group and finalized it and approved it and all of that. So I think as far as a significant change is concerned, we have an application that they must complete. It's only monthly? Could they take a portion of the
Well,
month?
they rent it for 3 months or 6 months.
Correct.
So 3 months, no, so not a month, 3 months or 6 months?
3 or 6 month leases.
Okay,
And again, 6 months is about the time that you can do outdoor dining. You probably can stretch it a little bit on either end. So I don't even know who would think about doing it for 3 months, but they want to.
well, and that's all over the city, though, it's not just downtown.
Everywhere.
Yeah, I mean,
So wherever there's a restaurant.
downtown is going to have a longer life than the design district. So
So-
they could need a 3-month as opposed to a 6-month.
A question for you is, how many restaurants do you have in your ward? No, you've got, isn't
Soul.
Lido's and Soul?
Oh, I'm
and-
sorry. I didn't
And
count
that Asian
Lido's.
restaurant? Yeah, so you have 3, and they're in strip malls, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to be renting public streets.
Right.
I mean, really, this.
They don't need to. They have their
As
own.
Stephen's table shows, is really going to be relevant to wards 1, 2, and 8. I can't think of, fast food restaurants aren't going to do this. So a
Well,
lot
they
of the
have their own.
restaurants-
Lido's has their own outdoor,
Yeah.
Soul has their own
So-
outdoor, and the other does not.
So I think, going back to a question you asked earlier, which was one I had, but when I looked at the locations, those 7 areas that are being priced out probably are the only area. And mainly, it's restaurants in residential areas that are not in some kind of mall, strip mall, mini mall, or the mall. And that's one of my major problems about 0922, not that we have to bother Stephen with this, which is it has a very different impact depending upon where in the city. And the alderperson that is submitting that has 5 food establishments, one of which is Annapolis Seafood. So it's not doing outdoor dining. So in any event, but can I thank Mr. Rice for giving
Please.
us a very, very thorough presentation and apologize because he was the first out of the box.
Well, no, we did have one other.
What we did
Didn't we have
was-
another one?
We had one with
Yeah, this
The
is the
harbor
second.
master.
Yeah, this is the
Right.
second.
And HPC.
and the
HPC was the first
HPC,
one.
right?
Okay.
and harbor
Yeah.
master.
Oh,
was
so this
added
is
on
the
to
third.
it.
So-
Yeah, but this is really the one that has a lot of details to it, a lot of guts to it, and,
Well, it's a whole new program.
Yeah.
So that does make it unique.
right.
But we're giving you our blessing.
Thank you very much.
That's all that's required, so. Thank you, Mr. Rice, for coming out. Not only during this pandemic, but on this yucky, rainy day. So, appreciate it. Ms. Green?
Just to keep in line with the others, did you want to give your motion? They actually were proposed by Alderman Arnett, a motion to
Amending.
acknowledge that you received and
For the record.
reviewed
Received
and
reviewed.
and with a favorable.
Yes. So
Okay, I'll
I make
entertain that motion.
That the Rules Committee received and reviewed the rules for parklets.
Okay, and I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Okay.
Stephen, I'll be back.
Send him to the city manager. Just keep sending him to the city manager or to the council. So we have one resolution, R-1722,
Yes.
the Annapolis Waterfront and Sailing Center.
Where's my thing? Yes, and this is my resolution, Madam Chair. And it is a resolution to recognize the Annapolis Waterfront and Sailing Center, which is a group for the longest time have been bringing in tall ships. They've brought in bull and bear and so forth, but also a group that do a lot of STEM programs. They work very closely with Archie Trader and Parks and Recs and a lot of pop-up camps. And it is an attempt to allow everybody to have an experience on the water, sailing largely, but also just other watercraft as well. The reason for the resolution is that the city has now received the long dock. The long dock had been administered by this organization through a memorandum of understanding with the state. That is now city, and the city has determined, and I subscribe to this, that the harbor master will be administering all of the on-water resources for the city, slips, mooring buoys, etc. And so this resolution, should it pass, will recognize that there is still a role for the Waterfront Sailing Center. There are two amendments that were suggested by the Maritime Advisory Commission and have been offered by Alderwoman Tierney. And one is in here it says, be it resolved that the Annapolis Sailing Center, I'm on page 2, is hereby, as a second, therefore, that the Annapolis Waterfront Sailing Center, by virtue of its expertise, is the liaison. The Maritime Advisory Board said it's a liaison. Okay, fine. If we have more liaisons to tall ships, I'm good with that.
As Ann.
Yes, right. And the other one is recognizing explicitly in the resolution that the city dock resources are managed by the harbor master. So be it resolved, the booking of reservations for docking shall be made by the captain or authorized agent of the vessel directly with the harbor master's office in accordance with applicable city rules and regulations. And I agree with that amendment as well. So I would make a motion to rule favorably on this resolution with the two Tierney amendments.
Ms. Green, do we have to take the amendment separately, or can we take the legislation with the two amendments in one action?
Yes, you can take the.
Okay, so, thank you. So your motion is to give a favorable recommendation to R-17 with the two Tierney amendments.
Exactly.
Okay, I will second that. I agree, and I'd like to be listed as a sponsor. because I agree, they do a phenomenal work with their education program and have made tremendous connections with our public schools. So, absolutely. So, further discussion?
Nope.
Hearing none? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Wow, that's it for our agenda. I do have one other piece of business, and it's not an agenda item, but our next meeting is scheduled for June 3rd, I believe it is.
Yes.
And my niece's wedding is on June 4th in Wisconsin at my dad's house. I will not be here on the 3rd. So I think if we have business at that meeting, that we would postpone that meeting for a week or set it at whatever date's available for everybody to attend.
The postponement would be to a city council date.
No, to
We're in June, right?
June 10th, maybe.
June 10th
No,
is your city council?
That's a city council meeting. We moved
I know. Did we move it to the 17th?
we moved it to the 10th.
To the 10th?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Now, do we know what time? It's a morning meeting?
You guys discussed having it at 10, so,
It's a morning meeting then?
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And then you have,
On the
MML,
9th,
the
we
12th
have,
to the 15th. The 9th, I won't be here.
okay. Well, I guess if there's no action, no business that we need to respond to for the 10th, we can go into the next week. If there is, we could go back to,
The next week is your MML,
okay.
Well, yeah,
12th to the 15th.
I need to do something for
I
that.
already have it.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Okay.
You probably have an email.
Where are we staying at? The Holiday Inn?
That was gonna be my next question. for
Yeah,
you.
where
Actually, they're booked. We can talk offline about that.
okay. The 6th is our long meeting.
Yes.
So that would leave us the 7th or the 8th.
Okay. I will check. with
7th
the
is
TV.
clear on my calendar.
How can you tell? Everything's got, oh, is that the one that doesn't have anything on it?
Right.
Okay. So the 7th would be good, I don't know how early we want to come back here after all day on the 6th.
Hey, I predict the 6th is going to be a very short meeting.
You think so?
I think so.
Oh, I hope so. It's got to be shorter than our finance committee yesterday. Okay.
I am so grateful to Gavin.
So,
Praise the Lord.
all right, so if you'll
I'll check on that.
facilitate that for us. All right, I'll entertain a motion if there's no further business.
I move that we adjourn.
Second, all in favor?
Aye. So
All right.
I'm going to move